something like became crystal clear to me. Like, go in, know what you want, but be sure you're open to the moose head on the table. Be sure you don't miss the opportunity that's lying right in front of you. And another great thing to learn early on.
Hello and welcome to My Hollywood Story. I am your host, Stacey Wilson-Hunt, and my guest today is the multi-Emmy nominated Lesli Linka Glatter, one of the most prolific directors in Hollywood history. In fact, her resume reads like the history of prestige TV itself. Twin Peaks, ER, The West Wing, Freaks and Geeks, Mad Men, Homeland, The Leftovers, Justified, and Netflix's 2025 limited series, 0 Day. And that barely scratches the surface of her career. Lesli, whom I've met and interviewed numerous times over the last decade, reveals to me what she learned from her directing mentors, David Lynch and Steven Spielberg. She also tells me why NBC refused to air one of her Freaks and Geeks episodes, which, fun fact, was co-written by White Lotus creator Mike White. She also reveals if she'd ever want to reboot Homeland, and what it's really like to direct Robert DeNiro. My Hollywood Story is sponsored by Mattel Films and recorded at Neue House Hollywood. If you like what you hear, give us a follow, leave a review, and let us know what you think. Welcome, Lesli, to the show. How are you? I'm so honored to have you here.
Oh, please. I'm so thrilled to be here, Stacey.
And I don't often say this, but you truly are a hero of mine. And as a journalist, I know I'm supposed to stay neutral about these things, but you really, truly are a hero of mine. And I'm so happy to have you here.
Oh, my God. Thank you so much.
And before we get started, I do want to acknowledge that you've had a challenging year.
Oh, yes.
You were among many people who lost their homes in the LA fires. And first of all, I just want to say I'm so glad you're safe and your family is safe. How have you been the last few months?
It was so overwhelming in terms of how big it was, how many people were affected. And that kind of in some weird way took over the sense of this community was wiped out, the community of the Palisades, the community of Altadena. You know, that's what is so shocking about it. It's not one loss.
Well, I hope that message has gotten out to the world about who's been impacted. And again, I'm just so glad you're safe.
Thank you.
I was so dismayed to hear what had happened.
Thank you. And again, it's so many of us.
Well, on to happier topics, which is your Hollywood story, which is why you're here today. So we're going way back to where your story begins, which is Dallas, Texas. And tell me how your life began in Dallas.
Oh, wow. Well, my parents are both from New York. My mother was a dancer, which is my career before I started directing, and she danced with Martha Graham and Hanya Holm and Alan Nicolai, and met my dad, who was a labor organizer for the International Ladies Garment Union. And she was in her 30s when she met my dad. So at that point, you know, I was born, I don't know, how old was she? 33 maybe? That was like Grammy's having a baby at that time. So they moved to Texas because my dad was organizing factories. I should also add that did not make us popular in Dallas, Texas.
Right, so what was the climate of Dallas back then culturally?
Very conservative.
Sure.
Very
that would be my guess.
Yes.
Okay.
You know, it was challenging, interesting. That I have such a mixed relationship with Texas. There are things that I love about it. I should also add, I went back and forth to New York the whole time I was growing up. So I had this very skitsy childhood and a lot in Europe, a lot of travel.
Wow.
Because my mom was choreographing for like the Irish National Ballet, the Swiss National Ballet, Bat d'Or in Israel. Wow. So we were kind of all over, but always going back to Texas. But Texas for me is big dreams, big land, big sky, big possibility. And it was also incredibly conservative.
All those things can be true at once.
Simultaneously.
Yeah. And when was the first time you felt creative as a young person?
Oh my God, what an interesting question. I think creativity in my family was always encouraged. The gift of the imagination. It's also, remember, my mom was a dancer.
Sure.
And everyone in her side of the family was in the arts. You know, whether it was painting or music. And so it was very much a part of life. We talked a lot about politics and
I'm sure the dinner table
art.
was very fun.
It was pretty interesting. But yes, that was always encouraged. I didn't have to fight for that. And I know people who did not grow up in that kind of a situation, that kind of family where they really had to struggle. And that was not the case with me. It was there.
And did you have siblings?
No, I'm an only.
Lesli, you seem so normal for being an only
I
child.
know. I am pretty normal. I hope. I think what happens when you're an only, you get a lot of the energy that would have gone to the firstborn son.
Interesting. Okay.
I think if you look at maybe firstborn daughters and onlys, women, children of that time, I think you'll find that because they got that energy.
And when did dance become a passion for you?
Because my mother was a so respected choreographer and teacher by the time I was born, I started in immediately, and that sense of the ballet. If you remember that song from Chorus Line, At the Ballet.
Oh, sure, of course.
There's that sense of magic in a dance studio, of movement and music and mirrors and possibility and leaps to the sky. So it was kind of a magical place to grow up, in that way.
Did you enjoy the rigor of dance?
Yes, I did.
Because it is very difficult.
It's really rigorous, and I have to say, now as a director, great
I was
great
just about to
path
ask,
to come
what
from.
did you learn that
Well,
has stayed with
you
you?
can't cheat. Your leg goes up in the air or it doesn't. I can tell you how great I am, and you're going to see in a second, I am full of shit. And you have to learn how to get from point A to point B to point C. You can't really cheat. It's like, and you have to do it every day. And I really believe also that everything comes from movement in some way.
And we see that a lot in your work, which we'll get into later.
Yeah,
a lot of
so-
choreography with camera work, I've
Yes,
noticed.
yes. I loved being in that world. I loved the fact that it's so immediate that you have nothing left afterwards. It's this ephemeral art that disappears after it's done. And yes, you can photograph it, but it's not the same.
So at what point did you decide that you wanted to pursue dance as a profession?
I was pretty young when I decided that was the path, but ironically, and you can only feel this when you're like 18 years old, I thought I would be a dancing neurosurgeon. Yes, I know it sounds insane.
So how would that work exactly?
Well, I thought, I'm a nerd. I'm like a nerd from way back. I thought, okay, I'll operate on brains by day and do concert modern dance at night. And at 18, that seemed very possible to me. And of course, after a year of pre-med, I realized, if I'm going to dance, it has to be now. Okay. So I placed out a couple of years of college. I graduated when I was 19.
Wow.
Went to New York and spent a few years in New York, and then moved to London and spent 3 years there and 3 years in Paris. This is with different companies. And then I got a grant. This is back in the dark ages when the American government actually sponsored the arts. So I was sent to Tokyo to teach, choreograph, and perform throughout the Far East. But I was based in Tokyo.
Wow.
Changed my life.
And I know when you were 25, you had a very meaningful meeting
Yes.
with a gentleman. Tell me about Yutaka.
Oh, wow. Yutaka Tsuji, my mentor in Japan. So as crazy as life is, I was in a very busy area of Tokyo and wanted a cup of coffee. Who knew
you do
that?
love coffee, as we
Because I
determined
love
earlier.
coffee. Yeah. So that simple act changed my life. Who knew that it would? There were two coffee shops, one on the right, one on the left. I arbitrarily picked the one on the right, and it was packed. And there was one seat left with Yutaka Tsuji, an older Japanese man. I was 25, he was probably 75, and he waved me over and offered me a seat. So I thought, okay, that's kind of interesting. My Japanese was, I don't know how long I had been there, not too long. So I was kind of fumbling in Japanese. But that was okay because he spoke so many languages. He had been the top foreign war correspondent in Japan, so he'd been all over the world, spoke beautiful King's English. And I ended up spending the afternoon sitting and talking to this incredible man. And he had been a Buddhist monk. At the time, he was head of cultural affairs for the Asahi Shimbun, which is the largest newspaper in Japan. And that's how they did cultural affairs. Wow. So by chance, I meet this incredible guy. And now, a number of years into knowing he and his wife, who became like my surrogate Japanese parents, he told me a series of stories that all happened on Christmas Eve, even though he's Buddhist, all during different wars and about human connection. And when he told me the stories, I knew I had to pass it on, and I knew it wasn't dance.
Wow.
So had I walked in the coffee shop on the left, I probably would never have directed, because that's what I made my first film about.
So did you feel yourself becoming a director in that moment?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. I just knew that the stories were a gift, and that it was a gift I needed to pass on. I felt like it was too big for me to hold by myself. In fact, I thought, because I directed theater, I thought, well, maybe this is a play. So I didn't know immediately by any chance that I would go into film.
And then you came back to LA at some point, or came back to the US?
I met the first film director I ever met, which was George Miller, from Road Warrior, George Miller.
And he's a colorful personality.
Oh my goodness, he's amazing. And he was a doctor before he was a director.
Right.
Yeah. So he was really supportive of someone who came from another field. But I ended up telling him the stories, Tsuji-san's stories, and he said, that's a film. So he was the first person who put that idea in my mind.
Wow.
Because I, again, didn't immediately go to film at all.
Right. You hadn't done it before.
I hadn't done it before. And then I started thinking about it, and I had been very affected by Japanese films, and I thought, well, maybe it is a film.
This episode of My Hollywood Story is brought to you by the new Starz drama series, Outlander, Blood of My Blood. An epic tale of love, legacy, and longing, this highly anticipated prequel series premieres on Friday, August 8th on the Starz app. What led you to explore AFI?
So again, I met someone when I finally moved back to LA. I was married to now someone who's like my brother, my dear friend. And he was coming to LA to work. I'd never been here, so I assumed I would go back to New York. And I ended up, stopping here with him. I had to do a concert, and it got a lot of attention. And I ended up on the dance faculty of California Institute of the Arts.
Oh, wow.
But these stories kept haunting me. And I met someone who told me about the directing workshop for women at AFI. And I was totally unqualified for the program, completely. But I thought, you know what? It'll make me put my ideas down on paper. I'm going to use this as a exercise to put down what I want to do. To co-write the script with a friend, which we muddled through, and to put my ideas down. And I never expected to get in. It was, that year they let in a theater director and myself as a choreographer. And of course, then I panicked completely because I realized I know nothing. I started looking at films in a completely different way.
You had a crash course.
Oh my God, big time. Because again, with dance, you know what you can't
Well, you see
do.
it. You see it in front of you.
I mean, I was looking at credits for the first time and going, key grip? What does that mean? What is a
It's like a different language.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
And, had the kind of AFI experience of seeing a number of the women's shorts who were very famous, and they looked huge. And I'm like, oh my God, I really am a dancer with no money. How am I going to do this? They gave us a little bit of money and a couple of days, just enough time and workshops to feel even more panicked. So I realized, okay, I better work on as many of the other women's films as I could to learn.
Oh, smart.
And do every job I could do so I understood what the process is. What everyone does on a set. And that was instrumental.
And the film would ultimately be called Tales of Meeting and Parting.
Yes, which is the first thing Tsuji-san said to me when I met him.
Oh, wow. I was wondering if that came from him,
Oh,
that
yes.
phrasing.
Absolutely.
Wow, what a beautiful sentiment.
Yeah.
And were you able to make the film at AFI? And
Yes.
then, okay.
But it was a workshop program.
It was a
so
workshop.
it was not, there were like 3 days of seminars, and then we were off on our own to
Wow.
go make our short films. So it wasn't like being part of the,
A graduate program.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
It was really amazing and challenging and terrifying. And, I knew day one, I thought, ooh, this could be my next chapter.
Wow. So you felt confident when you
Did I feel confident? No,
stepped
I
on
was
set for the first
absolutely terrified. But I felt like I understood the story I was telling. And I always find safety in the story.
That's so interesting. And for those who haven't seen the film, and by the way, it's not an easy film to find.
No, I know.
And I was lucky enough to watch it. It centers on an elderly Japanese man who recalls his experiences as a young interpreter during a brutal prisoner of war interrogation in World War II. And it is, I don't want to spoil it, it is really a stunning piece of work. For an inaugural film, it's very well done.
Wow. Thank you for that.
And I wasn't the only one to think that. You got an Academy Award nomination.
I did, which was shocking.
How did that
and amazing. I couldn't even believe it. I mean, the chances of that happening are 1 in a billion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I want to get back to that film in a second, but I can't forget to mention your collaboration with William Friedkin, which To Live and Die in LA. You were the choreographer on this film. And I remember seeing this film as a kid, and I revisited it. And it's pulpy, it's noir, it's LA, William Peterson, Willem Dafoe. It's a really fun movie.
It is.
But I love William Friedkin, and I'm so sorry he's not with us anymore.
Yeah, me too.
But it's so interesting to think about his films, French Connection, Exorcist.
Oh my God.
He must have been so proud of you later in your career, looking at not only the car chases and explosions that you oversaw, but I was curious what you learned from him and if you stayed in touch over the years.
I did stay in touch with him, not as much as some other directors who were so instrumental and were amazing mentors to me. That was the first professional set I'd been on. So when he hired me to do that, that's what paid for my film, for Tales of Meeting and Parting.
So that was like your day job.
That was my day, yeah. And it was also incredible as an experience to be on a film. And I had just shadowed with George Miller on his episode of the Twilight Zone the movie. Right. So I had, I was a newbie to all of this. So being able to observe Billy on set was incredible. It also, again, helped pay for my film. The money, I mean, AFI gave us like $3,000, which in the beginning sounded like a fortune to me. But of course I was a dancer, so $3,000 was a fortune. Right. And then I realized, no, it's going to cost more money than that. I think it cost like $12,000. Wow. But still, it was money I didn't have. So yes, I choreographed a Sheila E. video that got a lot of attention, and Glamorous Life, and
of course we know that song.
And To Live and Die in LA.
Wow, that is so interesting.
Yeah.
And I wish I had more time. I'd talk to you about Friedkin all day long, but
yeah, he's an amazing director. I mean, French Connection, please.
He's very missed.
Very much so.
So Tales of Meeting and Parting, I have to imagine, got you on Steven Spielberg's radar.
It did.
And then possibly put you in the running to direct Amazing Stories.
Yes.
So tell me about how that film kind of served as a proof of concept for your abilities to tell short anthology stories. And how did you meet Steven? So
I was living in the Melrose, Fairfax area in an apartment there. Somebody called up and said, well, it's Steven Spielberg calling. And I'm like, yeah,
sure.
Right. Sure. So I hung up. I thought it was one of my friends being, one of my friends. And fortunately, he called me back. He was on a plane, which I thought was incredibly,
Well, that just made it seem more unbelievable, right?
I know, so surreal. And it was Stephen, thank God. And he is still my mentor.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
You've had some good mentors.
I have been blessed. That's why I believe so strongly in mentorship and in giving back, because I was blessed to have the mentors I did. Yeah. So he called back and he said, he had seen Tales of Meeting and Parting, and Tales of Meeting and Parting opened up many doors.
Sure. Of course.
And then you have to be able to walk through.
And make sure you're not a one-off.
Right. And that is a terrifying thing also. So I went in to meet with him.
And this is after E.T., before he had started production on Amazing Stories.
He was just starting prep on Amazing Stories.
Okay.
But when I shadowed with him before I directed, and that was on Color Purple.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, because I asked him. So he explained to me what he was doing with Amazing Stories, that he was having his friends come and do, because it's a half-hour anthology, episodes, and he was going to give 3 new directors an opportunity.
So that was an edict of his. He wanted to give people opportunities.
Which is incredible.
That was rare back then.
Very rare.
Right.
And so he asked me if I wanted to direct, and I was like, absolutely. And the other 2 directors were Todd Holland, who's still a really good friend, and Phil Joanno, who I've lost touch with. But it was the 3 of us. I was by far the elder stateswoman because they were right out of film school. I had come from having a career and not really going to film school. So I was definitely the unicorn in that family.
But also you were a woman. You were already
I was
unicorn.
a woman, yeah.
Right.
So that was my film school in reality.
Wow.
I shadowed with Steven. I shadowed with Clint Eastwood. Go figure. I mean, between the two of them, they couldn't be more different, and both incredible directors. And some of the things I learned from Steven early on, I literally repeat to myself before.
What is something that you learned that you repeat to yourself?
Oh, well, there are two things. One is listen to your instincts.
Do you think directors don't often listen to their
I
instincts?
think you can get waylaid. I think you can get waylaid because you're running late or something's not working or it starts to rain. All the millions of things that can take you off your center. And he said, when you're watching a scene and something's not working, it could be any sort of reason. It could be something about the blocking. You haven't cracked the heart of the scene with the actors. There's something in the writing, it could be anything. But if you tell your instincts to shut up, they will. And they won't talk to you anymore. Right. So keeping that channel open to your instincts amid all the chaos of what could happen on a set in any moment is what you have to do. And, that's a great thing to be told early on.
Do you think directors are afraid to either hurt people's feelings, to ruffle the feathers of actors who can be sensitive sometimes? Is there a fear of not being liked?
Is there a fear? I wouldn't want to speak for everyone in that way. These are such personal things.
Sure.
I would say, sure, but I don't think that's necessarily what motivates people. I mean, what's scary to me, actually, you're looking at this news story and how to tell the story in a way that is unique. And what is this story really about? And it's terrifying. I'm about to start shooting, and literally, I have storyboarded this episode of Amazing Stories within an inch of its life.
Which episode was this?
Many times, called No Day at the Beach.
Yes.
Which was a war story set in World War II.
Starring Charlie Sheen.
Starring Charlie Sheen. And my first day of shooting was like 300 guys storming a beach in World War II.
That's so you, by the way.
I know.
Macho,
it's crazy.
military,
Yeah,
war.
Totally. It's like, really? And we're in one of those carts on the Universal lot, and I have this total panic dream. And who do I share that with? The one person who has trusted me completely, Steven. And I tell him about the dream, and of course I go to the set, and it's filled with pea green sofas, and it has nothing to do with what I'm supposed to be shooting, and they're already shooting. It's like your
And this was in black and white. This ended up being in black and white.
It did. Mm-hmm. And I tell him this story, and I think, what have I done? And then he looks to me and he goes, I have that kind of dream before I start anything new. And I don't know if it was true or he was just being kind to a new, terrified director. But what a beautiful act of generosity.
But just being so honest, too.
Being so kind and saying, you're okay. You're going to be okay.
And also, I hear so often from actors, too, the fear that goes into a performance is really also just the love that's going into it.
Absolutely.
And you care so much, which is why you're afraid.
It's so true. Right. It's so true. So he was amazing.
I'd like to say a very special thank you to Neuhaus for being the exclusive venue partner of My Hollywood Story. Neuhaus is a gorgeous private work and social space for creators, innovators, and thought leaders to connect in Los Angeles and New York. As a Neuhaus member myself, I can tell you firsthand how amazing it is to work inside such iconic, beautifully designed buildings, while also enjoying elevated hospitality and thought-provoking cultural experiences. To me, Neuhaus has completely redefined the ideal environment for creative potential and progress. To learn more and apply for membership, visit neuhaus.com. So speaking of mentors, jumping ahead a few years, you had the legendary opportunity to work with David Lynch.
I did.
Who we lost earlier this year, and he is also so missed. You did 4 episodes of Twin Peaks.
I did.
So much about looking back on this show seems surreal. The fact that it existed at all.
Yes.
The fact that it was on ABC. I want to know, what was David like in terms of, I know that's the largest question we could ever hope to answer, but in terms of collaborating and bringing people into his headspace? Because this isn't a man who could easily translate, or you would think that he could translate his vision to someone else. because he was an auteur. So tell me, how did you get hired, and what do you remember about your first conversation?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, how blessed to be able to go from learning from Steven Spielberg to learning from David Lynch.
Very, very different people.
Oh my God. But that also is so important because each director has to find their own way of doing things.
Right.
Yeah. And like everyone's path to doing what we do, nobody has the same path. You know, like telling someone, oh, you should go become a choreographer and live all around the world, and that'll be a way to direct.
On paper, it seems crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I had gone to see the pilot with the woman who cast it, Joanna Ray.
You went to see the pilot being filmed?
No, screened.
Oh, screened. Okay.
And I was blown away. It was the most interesting thing I'd seen, not just that year, for a while. You know, and I loved it. And I met David really briefly that night. And ironically, someone came up to me and told me how great I was in the show. And I was like, I was? Who did I play? You know, like, thank you.
That's very funny.
Anyway, I ended up going back to my agents and saying, I know it's probably insane, but I can't imagine how this is ever going to be picked up. It's ABC.
Right.
I mean, is this ever going to be on the air?
Right.
But if there's a chance, I would love to direct this. And then I had this crazy party downtown at an artist loft, and Lita Albuquerque, an amazing artist, and David and Nick Cage showed up.
Oh my.
I mean, it was a big party, and he said, you know, in David's way, you know, that he told me about Twin Peaks and would I come direct? And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Did he know your short film?
Yes, he had seen it.
Wow.
Yeah. That was another incredible learning experience. And everyone was there much longer than the time we were given to prep and shoot. It felt very much like, almost like a repertory film company. You know, but David never said do things this way or do things that way at all. Wow. It was a director-run show.
Wow, that's very different from television, which is usually writer-run.
Yes, correct. And so he really encouraged each director's individuality. The music would hold it together.
Gorgeous score.
Be honest to the storytelling. And so it was an incredibly creative environment. Because in no way, he's so out of the box. He in no way would tell someone, you got to be in this box. And how would you try to copy David Lynch? Right. It's impossible. You know, and you really can't copy anyone when all is said and done.
Well, you can only try to emulate, but
I think what
so
you
singular.
can try to do is look at the essence of something. Yeah, but if you try to copy someone, you're going to fail because you can't be inside that person's, you know, heart and mind and vision. So you got to find your own way.
Best not to try.
Best not to try. It will be, but there were some amazing stories working with. I mean, there's a story I've told many times because it changed my life.
Is this the moose head on the table?
Yes. I mean, that's
Tell it again
just
because I love
an
this story.
unavoidable story for me
it.
because, and again, in my phone, which I have over there, I have a photo of that moose head on the table.
It has really stuck with me when you shared it when David passed. It's so simple, but tell it so people can hear it.
So again, new director. I haven't done that much. So I come to David and, you know, I'm hanging out on the set. I had watched the first hour. So the one after the pilot, which David directed. And there's a scene of Michael Keane and Kyle MacLachlan in a bank vault. And they were looking at a safety deposit box. And on the table is a moose head. You know, and the camera never moves. No one ever talks about the moose head. And they play the whole scene out. And it's incredible. So I go to David and I'm like, David, where did you get the idea to put the moose head on the table?
And why?
And why? Yeah, what
right.
were you thinking?
It served no narrative function in this.
No, what was the process involved there? And he said, it was there. I'm like, what do you mean it was there? He said that the set decorator had come in and was going to hang it on the wall. And he saw it lying there and he said, leave the moose head. And then something like became crystal clear to me, like go in, know what you want, but be sure you're open to the moose head on the table. Mm-hmm. Be sure you don't miss the opportunity that's lying right in front of you. And another great thing to learn early on.
And also, if it fits the absurdity of the world you're capturing, which certainly in this case,
It
did.
absolutely did.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that, I feel like, be sure you're open to opportunity. I still prep like a crazy person. I want to know that I've walked through every scene in the shoes of every one of those characters. But then I want to toss it up in the air and, hope that something else happens. Hope that there's a better idea from literally, hopefully the actors, from the crew, from you never know where the best idea will come from.
So amazing. And also to think about getting a directing gig on this show, such a zeitgeist piece of television. But as a woman, we can't discount, this was very rare. So can you sort of outline what was the landscape for women directors in television in the early 90s? If there was a landscape at all.
If there was a landscape. And there were very few women. And again, remember, I came out of dance, which is highly female.
Right.
So it never occurred to me for quite a while.
Did you know you were singular?
No, I never thought that way at all.
Maybe it's best you didn't think that way.
Probably. It might have been a huge help because I never saw it as a problem. And then when I realized after a certain amount of time, you hear enough, we hired a woman once and it didn't work. And I'm like, wait a second, you would never say that about a white guy. We hired a white guy once and it never worked. It didn't work, so we're not going to hire any more of those. So it became clear at a certain point that, it was unusual. Why, I don't know, because women are totally suited to directing.
Yes.
But that was definitely the case.
It was also before this became a talking point.
Yes.
Before people demanded that things shift.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah. And we'll talk about your role in that later, because you've been very vocal.
I feel like,
making sure of that.
It became clear to me also because I've been very well mentored that you have to pass that on. You have to grab the hand of the next generation. You have to, that there was this feeling at that time that was only room enough for one of us at the table. And that's a terrible way to be thinking.
People of color have felt like that for decades.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. But that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, then build a bigger table. I have to say, helping other women and people of color has never hurt my career. Even though I was told that it would. It's absolutely not true.
I think that's a lie that a lot of us were told.
I think that's very true.
Because it
and now
suited...
there's such a girls' club.
This suited the tone.
And that's fantastic.
All right, we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
And now we move on to yet another mentor relationship that you had, John Wells.
Oh, yes.
The dear John Wells, one of my favorite people in the business.
Yes.
Someone like you, I think of as just being a model for quality and kindness. And ER was the first show that I regularly saw your name. So ER premiered the fall of '94.
Yeah.
We just marked 30 years, which is hard to imagine. What was your first job on the show? And what was your first meeting like with John in terms of his vision, but also how he wanted you to bring a personal flair to your directing?
John is an extraordinary guy. And he deserves, the title of showrunner.
He kind of invented the modern showrunner ethos.
But I don't know that he would even call himself that. I'd be curious if he does. But he is an incredible writer. He's an incredible producer. He's now an excellent director. Yes. But he really knew how to write and produce. And these are not skills that necessarily go together. No. Because you can sit in a room alone and create a brilliant story is an amazing skill to have. It's very different than what it takes to translate that story into reality and how to make that happen. These are very different skills.
Right, and it's rare for someone to have all of these skills.
Yes, and he does. Yeah. He does have that.
What do you remember about your first meeting with him?
He's a kind man, and he wants you to feel comfortable. And I really think people work best when there's a no asshole policy, when you treat everyone with respect. Who knew? And that was certainly one of the first things. And of course, his body of work. And he asked me to come direct. You know what? There was another amazing woman director on that show, and that's the incredible Mimi Leader,
yes,
who's a dear friend. And she's someone that we've kind of supported each other
Yeah,
throughout.
you've kind of had parallel experiences.
Yes,
Right.
yeah. And she was on that show as producing director.
I remember seeing her name too.
Yes.
And she'd go on to do some very big features.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And so we became friends, and she was around during my first episode, and it was just the right mix. I really loved the material. It was very choreographic to me.
Well, that's why I want to talk about the camera work. And
Yes.
I revisited all the episodes you directed on
Oh,
here,
my
which I
God.
think is 13, if I'm being...
Yeah, it might have been something like that.
But I love the show so much as a fan, but now watching it, understanding more about directing, not a lot, but
Yeah.
a little bit more about the job. The constant motion of the camera as the person's being wheeled into the ER, as they go into surgery, it never seems to stop. So was this all Steadicam work? How did you achieve this?
It's a combination.
Okay.
I mean, there was a lot of Steadicam and the ability to combine things and do in one shot, but it has to work for the story. Like
Right.
you wouldn't want to shoot that way if it wasn't going to tell the story
Of
in the
course
best
not.
way. And there were certainly scenes that were on dolly and in studio mode. Certainly if you're inside a hospital room. You know, it depends on what the scene is.
Right. And there's a
The
lot of
choice-
intimacy in the show.
There is a lot of intimacy. So I think that juxtaposition is what made it exciting. If everything is the same pace, it loses any sense of
you
pace.
seem to thrive when there's a mix.
Yes.
You've got a car chase. You've got a love scene. You have a long exchange between two characters. It seems like you really love having to change
Absolutely.
and being very dynamic.
Yeah. Every story has its own necessity of how you tell it. You know, and it's always about finding out, well, okay, what is the theme of this show? What is this really about? Are we talking about the text or subtext? And you combine that with layered, complicated, complex characters.
Yeah.
You
You can't
know,
go wrong.
You can't go wrong, but you have to have a good story.
And speaking of John Wells, he's had a huge hit in The Pit.
I'm so thrilled.
So you must be
and
very
know
proud.
it. Oh my God!
And,
you know, with having absolutely nothing to do with
No,
it.
I know, but being able to look at it as, again,
absolutely.
just someone who's proud of him and also
Yeah.
proud of the storytelling. What do you think is so resonant about this show now? Is there an anachronism to this show that feels comforting? I'm trying to digest, like, what is it about? Is it because it feels like a broadcast show we used to watch in the day? It posts every week. It's not posted all at once. What do you think it is?
I think it's all of that. I think Noah is brilliant.
He's
in it.
extraordinary.
But I also think there's something about those life and death situations where people are striving to be the best they can be. They're really trying to do something that's positive. And I think in the world we're living in the country we're living in, things are so dark and complicated. And here are people who are trying to save other people.
Like everyday heroes.
They're everyday heroes. And exactly, you know, and they're fighting against insurmountable odds because the pit is much worse than the hospital in Chicago.
Right.
I mean, it's where medicine is now,
Right.
that you are never going to be able to catch up.
Right.
There are so many people in the waiting room, no matter what you do. It's a, you know, in some ways futile, you know, task,
and
but
sort
you
of
do
this-
it anyway.
Right.
And that to me is inspiring. And I think right now we need that.
Yes. And it's very complicated, and I think the show handles it with a lot of humanity.
I agree.
Without being polarizing.
I think that's the word.
Right.
There's a lot of humanity.
Yeah. Well, I can't talk about ER without asking you what it was like to direct George Clooney.
It was fantastic.
And you saw him start from, he'd been on Roseanne, and he'd done some other things, but
Yeah.
we saw in real time this man becoming a giant star, and
Absolutely.
he would ultimately leave and become a giant movie star.
And
what do you remember about him?
I mean, he was so much fun to work with.
Was he a prankster back then?
Oh, big time. Big time. You know, he and Anthony Edwards together and Eric LaSalle. Oh my God. And Noah. Yeah. No, they were amazing. But I think, you know, George was a grown-up when he got this kind of success. He had
Right.
been around for a while. And I think he was able to handle what happened to him as a result. You know, and
He got,
and
I mean, that was like overnight. It was like what the Friends cast experienced too. Like really in that
was
first
overnight,
season.
but he wasn't, you know, a teenager.
Right.
I think it's really hard to handle that kind of success when you're really young. And he had, you know, a lot of pilots that went and didn't get picked up. And things didn't work out, and to have something work out in the way that did, it feels like he was prepared for it. And, like that kind of fame makes you more of what you were to begin with.
Oh, sure.
So if you're a good person, you might even become a better person. But if you're a shit, you're going to become a really big shit.
We've seen a lot of cases of that over the years.
And we've seen a lot of cases of that. And he's a lovely guy.
He seems like it. And I'm sure he was very served by having you as a director on the show.
Yeah.
You can claim everything for his career. It's fine.
Oh, yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah, right.
Creating something out of nothing is joyous and hellish.
And everything in between.
The Screenwriting Life podcast is about digging into the craft and emotional life of being a writer and an artist.
My co-host, Meg LaFauve, is an Oscar-nominated writer.
And my co-host, Lorian McKenna, is an Emmy-nominated showrunner. Together, we interview pro guests like Buffy showrunner Marty Noxon and Wall-E writer-director Andrew Stanton to talk about the vulnerable process of creating.
We want to help you keep writing and to know that you are not alone.
The Screenwriting Life is available anywhere podcasts are found.
So I want to talk about a movie that I loved, Now and Then, 1995.
Yes. Oh, my God.
Your first studio feature.
Yes.
Starring Melanie Griffith, Rita Wilson, Rosie O'Donnell, and Demi Moore as adults,
Yes.
recounting the summer of 1970, and of course playing their younger selves, Christina Ricci, among them Gabby Hoffman and Thora Birch. And the other actress, I read, sadly, she passed away.
She did.
What was her name?
Ashley Aston Moore.
That is so terrible.
I know.
I'm so sorry to
I
hear
know.
that. What a special movie, sort of what I would call a female Stand By Me,
Yes.
for lack of a better term. So I want to just talk about the landscape for female directors of theatrically released films in the mid-90s, which, again, scant at best. We had Catherine Bigelow, Point Break, amazing movie. Penny Marshall, League of Their Own. Jane Campion had seen crossover from art house to consumer audiences
Right.
with The Piano. Beloved Nora Ephron with Sleepless in Seattle. And then, of course, Amy Heckerling, Clueless in
Yes.
1995. So again, not a huge community
Nope.
of people here who are thriving at the box office. This is leading me to ask, how did you get the studio job? Did it come through your agency? Did you have to lobby for it? How were you hired?
I'm trying to remember how I was hired. I was sent the script from the producers.
Okay.
Now, I'm not sure from Suzanne Todd and Jennifer Todd. Claire Rednick-Polstein was the executive at New Line, who then was with John Wells for years,
Right.
running his feature film section. And so I was sent the script and immediately responded to it because, there hadn't been a movie about girls growing up.
No.
And again, I love mixing it up, doing really tough, action-based, but character-based, because if you don't have good characters, none of it matters. But I'm also interested in stories about women and women's experiences, and the fact there hadn't been a movie about, I don't know, that summer where your life changes and you'll never be the same again, those friends you meet when you're a kid that you promise to be best friends with,
Right.
that, and the power of that.
Essentially what Judy Blume had been writing about for decades.
Forever.
But you're right, we hadn't ever seen it on
Nope.
film before.
And I think it's why it became such a kind of iconic film for so many young women growing up, because they hadn't seen their story in
Right.
any way.
Right.
So
And the movie was a success, made $38
Yes.
million, which at the time I
It was
think the
made
budget I
for-
read was $12 million,
Yeah.
that's a very affordable movie.
yes,
By today, that's like
Absolutely.
barely an episode of TV. Did this change your profile in the business? Did people suddenly like, oh, this woman's been working in TV, she should really be a feature director?
wow. I think especially at that time, that movie allowed me the next movie. I think there have been a lot of people who talked about that, especially then, that the sense is if you were a woman and you directed a movie that made money, you would get another movie out of it. But if a man directed a movie that made money, you would get 5 movies out of it.
So you had kind of one chance after.
You definitely got another chance,
Right.
which I did. Yeah.
And then, so the proposition in 1998,
Right.
that marked, at least for what I can tell, your last studio
Yes,
feature. Now, was
yes.
that by choice?
No, not by
Okay.
choice.
Okay.
I mean, what happened with that film is it was made for Polygram. Polygram was going out of business by the time it was going to be released.
Oh, that's not good timing.
It was not good timing. And I remember this. Miramax wanted to buy it, and Polygram wouldn't sell it. So because they wanted the write-off, whatever reasons, and it just died. So that happens, you have to go back and reinvent yourself.
Right, because again, women are not allowed the same room for error that a male director would have.
And it doesn't matter why it's not successful. It can have nothing to do with the directing of it. It's just, it wasn't successful.
The behind-the-scenes drama with the studio.
Yeah.
Right.
None of that matters. So for me, you have to lick your wounds and get up and do it again. But I never thought, I guess I always thought I'd go, in my fantasy life from movie to movie, but that's not what happened. And I decided I would go for the best story, regardless of the medium of delivery, whether it was going to come, on your TV screen or on a movie screen. And I have to say, Stephen did talk about that in Amazing Stories. He goes, you can't tell a lesser story. You have to tell a visual story, regardless of whether it's going to be on TV or in a theater.
So just because it's television, you're not telling a lesser story.
You can't. And he said you have less time to make it, to shoot
Right.
it, so you have to be really clear on what your story is. So I think it's a great training ground in that way. You have to know your story.
In your incredible career, we now come to 1999
Yeah.
and the making of NBC's Freaks and Geeks, a show that for me embodies and defines brilliant but canceled.
Yes.
And of course, created by Paul Feig and produced by Judd Apatow.
Yes.
Two people who've gone on to do extraordinary work.
And that whole cast has
And
gone on to do
literally-
extraordinary work.
Literally every person in the cast has had an amazing career. And you directed 2 episodes, Boyfriends and Girlfriends, and
Yes.
Kim Kelly is My Friend.
Yes.
So in digging into these 2 episodes, I found out that Kim Kelly is My Friend actually was so controversial that NBC yanked it from the lineup.
That's
so
absolutely
walk
correct.
me through what happened.
Yes.
And we must also add that Mike White, the king of taboo,
Wrote it.
He wrote it, and he also appears in the episode
Yes, he
playing
does.
Chip Kelly, Kim Kelly, who is Busy Phillips. He played her brother.
That's correct.
So tell me what you remember about making the episode and what happened with this episode.
Yes. I remember reading the script and laughing out loud, how out there it was.
Yes.
And so I was really excited about it. And yes, I know we were kind of on the edge of, okay, was this appropriate? I don't even know what word. It was
Right.
definitely on the edge.
Right.
But did I ever think that they would never air it? No, I didn't think so at all. But actually, Judd and Mike White and I, years later, went back and recorded a commentary. And when we watched it all together, I have to say it was pretty out there. I mean, I loved that it was
Right.
pretty out there. But, basically what happened, Linda Cardellini's character.
Lindsay Weir.
Yeah, Lindsay is taken home to a dinner at Busy Phillips' house.
Right.
Busy Phillips, kind of the bad girl.
Sure, and they kind of not as, I wouldn't say Linda's family was wealthy, but more middle class.
Middle
His family
class.
was a little
And
bit more struggling.
This was a much more working class family, and Busy lies to them, and they get into a huge fight, and they're eating takeout chicken, and the father goes running after them. I mean, it's pretty out there.
and a wonderful appearance by Ann Dowd.
Oh
as
my
Kim's
God.
mother.
And Dowd was brilliant, But I mean, you're crying and laughing, and it was funny and upsetting, all of that at the same time. It was really risky, again, kind of on the edge material. And then there's a later scene where James Franco meets Rashida Jones.
Right.
And, Busy and James are a couple.
Right.
And she finds them in the park, and he's like sucking on her finger, and she freaks out, tries to run them down. I mean, it was pretty out there.
It's like classic Mike White.
It's like one thing after another, and then James shows up at Linda Cardellini's house, and the parents kind of freak out. There's like a huge fight. It was very funny and revelatory in terms of character, and no, they did not air it.
Right. So when did you find out that this was happening, and how did you find out?
Well, after I direct something, I don't actually watch it on TV.
You don't?
No, I don't.
Leslie,
I don't.
why?
Well, I watch cuts, and then I do an evaluation of my work. But then by the time I've done that,
Is it because you feel so close to it that you just don't want to revisit it?
No, not at all. It's just that I feel like the work is done, and now it's out there in the world. And I've already like looked at it and reflected back on it. No, maybe if I did this differently or that differently, I've done all those conversations to learn from it. So I don't think I knew that till I did the commentary. Wow. And then I was indignant, righteously indignant.
Of course. So how was this news communicated to you? Was it through Paul or Judd that NBC was pulling the episode?
No, it happened. I found out they had pulled it the day we were doing the commentary, the three of us.
Oh, so you didn't know until later that they had pulled it?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Well, and that must have been a shock.
It was a shock, which is where my righteous indignation came flaring out. But then when we watched it, we all kind of laughed about it. You know,
and I do understand. It was very dark. It was definitely pushing the boundaries. It really was more of a cable show, let's face it.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think that was the time where network TV was pushing certain kinds of shows. Were pushing the edge of that.
Right.
You know, and nowadays, if that was on, or you know, it would definitely be a cable show. It would never have been on network TV.
Absolutely.
And I think that's why it didn't last, quite honestly.
We've talked about this in the past, is how the network didn't see it as aspirational
No,
enough. And there was something about inherently uncomfortable about never seeing these kids succeed.
Right.
Which I think now, look at Big Bang Theory, look at other shows that celebrate nerds.
Right.
This was not the case.
And also, it felt real. It wasn't that these kids didn't have any success. It just felt real. I mean, growing up is complicated and difficult, and we all go through it and somehow survive it, and here we sit. But you know, that was not something that at that point the networks felt they wanted to show.
Right.
They wanted something that felt completely different.
More advertising friendly.
Or advertising friendly. 28-year-olds playing 17-year-olds who are so gorgeous you can't believe it.
Of course. Well, I'd say Judd, Paul, and the cast have had their revenge since then.
I say that's true.
And now we come to another show centered on a young person, very different show, Gilmore Girls.
Oh, yes.
And I was so interested to find out that this was your first ever pilot
episode.
Yes,
it was my first pilot.
Which is such a different animal.
Oh, yes.
And scary probably in a lot of ways. Tell me what was inherently challenging about shooting the pilot for this show, which in my opinion broke the mold on so many levels in terms of, it was for the WB, which was still fledgling at that time. But Amy Sherman-Palladino's loquaciousness that she's written into these characters was unprecedented, almost like theater.
Yes.
So tell me how you not only managed not having a huge budget, keeping Lorelai and Rory at the center of this story and their incessant banter that we would ultimately fall in love with.
Yes.
But also make it artistic.
Yes.
How difficult
was that? I read the script and fell in love with it. I hadn't told a mother-daughter story, you know, and in between all the kind of action and drama.
Police shows and government, military.
Absolutely. I love coming back to stories about mother-daughters, female friendships. You know, I want to mix it up. I don't want to be repeating myself and live in the same genre all the time. And that was something that actually TV offered. It wasn't even a full pilot that we shot. Almost like a short film to show what the pilot could be.
I see. So a proof of concept for the pilot.
That's right.
Okay.
So the first part of it was not even a full pilot. So this is a show that is completely character-based. It is not a thriller. Right. So to only tell a part of it, if you don't kind of fall in love with these characters, it's really hard to know what the show is going to be. So we tried to shoot as much of it as possible.
Right.
I can't remember what they called them at that time. There was
Seems like a strange model now, thinking back.
Oh, it would be ridiculous. Such a waste of money.
Totally.
Like,
I was just about to say
you're going back to the same sets, repeating it.
And what's interesting about Gilmore Girls, which probably made your job even tougher, is that it's not a premise pilot.
No, at all.
We're dropped into Stars Hollow, into this, very pleasant, sweet, small town in Connecticut. No major event takes place. We just get to meet characters, which feels almost like Andy Griffith.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because Amy told me the way she sold the pilot. It was her first pilot, too.
Yes. Yes.
So she went in and pitched it as you meet a guy is driving through town and hits on the daughter and then hits on the mother. And that was like the pitch.
Right.
and Gilmore Girls came out of that, which is amazing.
That's a little bit saucy compared to what we ended up seeing.
I know. But like they're so close in age, they're
Right.
almost like friends.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was a very unusual mother-daughter story, and that's what I fell in love with. But I do have a really funny story with the casting
Please
of
tell.
Lauren Graham, who was
Yes.
amazing, and Alexis, both of
Also
them.
extraordinary.
So Lauren Graham, there is a scene where she refers to Jack Kerouac. Yeah. And when actors would come in to read, many of them mispronounced Jack Kerouac and said Jack Kerouac. And so Amy and I were like laughing, saying, there's no way we can cast someone who does not know who Jack Kerouac is.
That feels like a good threshold.
Yeah.
Right.
It was like, okay. And even if you haven't read anything of his, look it up. Find out.
I grew up knowing his name at least.
Yes,
Right.
yes. So that was, a line in the sand. And then we had a hard time finding Alexis.
How did you find Alexis?
Well, she was a theater student at NYU, and she had done 2 school plays.
Okay.
And the reason it was hard, we needed to cast someone who was incredibly attractive but wasn't aware of it.
Right.
So
Endearingly nerdy. in a sense.
endearingly nerdy and incredibly smart. Because to have someone you don't believe could do that kind of banter
Right.
would be, you wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't believe these characters. And part of the joy of Lorelai and Rory is that kind of banter, that they are so smart and
they're
so
equally
well read.
smart.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It is so interesting. I think a lot about the old model of television was aspirational
Yes.
television. So people would then buy products what they saw on TV. And when I think about Gilmore Girls, so much of it's aspirational in the sense that Amy's aspiring for her audience to be as smart as the characters.
Yes.
And she's
Yes.
aspiring for all the characters to be smart. And I think that's so unique.
Yes.
It really is. So it makes me feel smart watching it that Amy trusts me to know who Jack Kerouac is.
Yes, and all of the references
Right.
to literature, pop culture.
Like the fountainhead is mentioned a number of times.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That is so amazing.
Yeah.
And
And I now, knowing how many mothers and daughters watch that show together, that's really rewarding.
oh, it's such comfort viewing.
Yeah.
Every year, and I read it spikes every fall.
Yeah.
On Netflix, and people
Isn't
want
that
comfort.
hilarious? I mean, I get it.
It's so interesting.
Yeah.
And I also read it has more streaming hours than Seinfeld.
Oh my God, I did not know that.
That's incredible.
Okay,
to me.
that's really
the power
interesting.
of female viewers.
Oh yes, yes.
So now we come to a very different show, but really one of the most important shows of the last 20 years, Mad Men.
Oh yes.
Mad Men on AMC, which really, for many reasons, kick-started premium television. It was already there with
Absolutely.
Sopranos.
Basic
But basic,
cable.
exactly.
Yeah.
And AMC, I think people forget, it was really just,
Limited
series westerns before
Absolutely.
this. Right.
And a lot of reruns of old movies.
Right.
And, when I was sent the script of that pilot, I flipped out. Now, I
Really?
did not direct the pilot.
How did you get the script? Did your team send it to you?
I think it was my team.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did you think when you first read
Oh
it?
my God, I loved it.
So I have to bring up my favorite episode, at least that you directed. Guy
Thank
walks
you.
into an advertising agency, for which you won DGA, and you also earned an Emmy nomination.
Yeah.
And I rewatched it recently, and I'm so struck by how Lynchian this episode is. Your mentor, David Lynch, there is
Yes.
so much going on in this episode. It's campy, it's
Yes.
bloody, it's super emotional.
Yep.
Tell me what you remember about the first time you read the script for this episode and you thought, wow, this is a heavy lift.
Yes, I read the script and I went into full-on panic mode.
In terms of what?
Well, because it's the kind of script, given what happens in it. So, this takes place at an advertising agency,
Right.
and a John Deere tractor is brought into the agency to kind of show it off.
Well, the British executives are visiting. It's 4th of
Yes.
July, so they're showing off.
They're showing off. It's a party.
Right.
And also Don Draper, John Hamm, thinks he's about to get a promotion.
Right.
It turns out that Guy, who walks into the advertising
Yes.
agency,
Right.
is the British man who is going to get the promotion that Don thought he was going to get.
Right.
They have this party celebrating him. So there's a lot of
And
emotions
Joan's last
around
day.
this.
Joan's
Yes,
last day in
Joan is
office.
going off to get married.
Right.
There's many things going on.
Right.
And then horrifyingly, the tractor cuts off the foot of Guy, who no longer can walk in or out of the advertising agency.
And Roger has a great line about just when he got his foot in the door.
Exactly. and then he says also something, somewhere this has happened before.
Which is so David Lynch, by the way.
It's so insane. And the janitor is scraping the blood off the window. Window washer is scraping the blood off the window. At the same time this is going on. It's just, and so I shot it like a little mini action sequence because you kind of have to. And when I first read the script, I thought either this is going to be amazing or a complete disaster. And those special scripts that are so on the edge usually feel like that.
Right.
You usually feel like if I don't pull this off, this is going to be like absolutely horrifying.
And they're trusting you to pull it off.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And this was co-written by Robin Veith and
yes.
Matt Weiner.
Yes,
right.
that's correct.
So one of the other takeaways in my revisiting this episode is the incredible performance that Kiernan Shipka gives at the end when she's afraid of her baby brother.
Yes.
And Don is reading her the bedtime story. I think he's reading her book.
Yes.
That is one of the most stirring scenes I've ever seen of a young child. She was, I think, 9 at the time.
She was amazing.
How do you direct a child that young with such densely emotional material like this episode?
I think the main thing is you want them not to look like they're acting.
Okay.
Which she never felt like that. She always felt like a truth teller, and be very simple.
And of course, now we come to your most iconic series on your resume, and there's so many to choose from. Showtime's Homeland.
Yes.
Obviously, you were a director and ultimately became an executive producer.
Yes.
You earned 6 Emmy nominations and 6 DJI nominations and 2 wins, including for the finale, which I think is a perfect finale.
Thank you. Oh my God. Thank
But
you.
I do want to talk about
Yes.
Q&A.
Yes. My first episode. Q&A, they had asked me to come direct the first season. I was not available. I should add that the director of the pilot, Michael Cuesta, did a brilliant job.
He did.
And they called me back the second season, and I loved the show. I had seen the show. I was like, oh my God, I never knew from one episode to another, is he guilty? is he a criminal?
Very confusing.
It was great. It wasn't confusing. It was great storytelling because it kept me on the edge of my seat as to what was really going on.
And who's a villain and who isn't.
Exactly.
Right.
And when I got the script of Q&A, it's very funny. That was another panic attack.
Really?
Because it was, I think, like 40 pages in one room.
Whoa.
Which for a director is like you have nothing to hide behind.
Right.
I can't do some crazy camera moves. I can't, what is going to happen? 40 pages.
Wow.
And then I realized, okay, I'm going to be in this room with Claire Danes and Damian Lewis with incredible dialogue.
Right.
So what's happening is this is the scene in which she breaks in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So the dance between these two brilliant actors around how much you give, how much you take, how much you let in, how much you deflect.
It was like a piece of theater.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So it turned out to be an incredible experience working with those actors with that material. And after that, they asked me to come on.
You became part of the family after that.
I absolutely did.
So it's really interesting having seen Tales of Meeting and Parting.
Yes.
Another piece of film or another piece of storytelling that features an interrogation scene.
Yes.
What did you learn having made the short film that you applied here in terms of either where the cameras fit, the way you paced it? Were there any similarities?
It's such different material.
Yeah.
And the Homeland scene was really 2 people in the scene.
Right.
And that felt very different. And there was a certain dance that each of them had to do. One as a intelligence officer, and how you would question someone that you're trying to break, and someone who has been tortured and broken many times.
Right.
So that was a very specific kind of dance. So plotting that out, beat by beat was exciting, and then seeing these actors find those things, it was amazing. Yeah.
That episode is kind of a classic Leslie episode in the sense it has everything.
Yes,
you
it
have
did
this
have
car
everything.
accident
Yeah.
sequence starring of course,
Timothee
Chalamet. So I wouldn't be a fan if I didn't ask, what was it like to direct Timothee Chalamet? I think he was around 16 years old.
Yes, that's right.
He
was
struck
amazing.
You? What struck you about what made him feel unique as a performer?
Again, he, like, most of the actors in that cast, I have to say, felt realistically real. They did not feel like they were acting. They felt grounded in who they were. And you felt that from him, like you were talking about with Kiernan, as a young actor as well. The funny thing is that the first thing we had him doing is driving and he's from New York and didn't know how to drive. So that's always one of those, oh, okay.
Yes, that's the problem with casting New Yorkers. They don't always know how to drive.
Yeah. Yeah, but he was incredible even back then.
Wow.
You know. And I think with Homeland, the thing that was so amazing about the process was that every season, before the season started, we would go to DC.
Yes, I was going to ask about this.
Yes, and meet with the intelligence community. So we'd meet with the heads of the CIA, NSA, DNI, State Department, investigative journalists, paramilitary, and ask them what keeps you up at night. What are your deepest fears for America and the world?
Well, I imagine having made Homeland prepped you very well for Zero Day on Netflix.
Yes.
And you directed all 6 episodes, which aired this year, 2025. Yes. And for those who haven't seen it, it's a limited series centering on a former president investigating a devastating cyber attack in the U.S. and starring a young actor named Robert DeNiro.
Yes.
And Joan Allen, Lizzie Kaplan, Jesse Plemons, and Connie Britton. What an amazing cast.
And add Angela Bassett.
Oh, yes, Angela Bassett. How could I forget?
Matthew Modine to that list.
Wow.
And Dan Stevens.
Okay, there's just too many people.
It's crazy. I feel like I'm in a director dream cast land.
It was a very, very, very impressive ensemble. So something struck me in watching this series, which also struck me in watching Alex Garland's film that came out last year, Civil War.
Yeah.
That the writers in both cases go out of their ways to make the characters politically neutral. There's no mention of political party. And I want to know what the narrative function is for you as a producer, but also as a director, and how this impacts the story.
Oh, that's a great question, Stacey. So I think what we're looking at here and what excited me is the theme of what is truth in a post-truth world. And how do you have a conversation if you can't agree on what is fact and what is opinion? And that's very much the world we're in. So to polarize this by clarifying right, left, it's not about that. And we didn't want to do that. We very clearly steered away from that.
Well, in both sides, we can all agree that this is a problem. No matter how you
Huge
think,
problem.
They don't trust us, we don't trust them, whoever the we and they are in this situation.
Exactly.
Right.
So it's all based on fact. A zero-day event is flaw in software that can be hacked. So which it means this is like the most powerful cyber weapon. It can take down an entire industry. So let's say taking down the power grid in winter in the Ukraine would be a cyber attack.
Right.
Taking down aviation and transportation, taking down banking. Well, this takes it to the extreme, which has never happened. So that's the one line we cross over, and we do that very consciously. Is there is a cyber attack that affects every industry simultaneously. And it lasts for 1 minute, but what appears on everyone's phone is a message that says this will happen again.
Right. Very
so
scary.
When you have people paralyzed by fear, how do they behave? If there was another 9/11, God forbid, would we actually go to war with the right person? The right country.
Right.
Would we be more conscious about, how we approached it? And when people are terrified, they'll give up all personal freedoms to feel safe again.
And what is an alliance in that context?
Exactly.
Right.
So Robert DeNiro, and I can tell you at first I was really nervous about working with a legend.
So that was my next question: is what is it like to direct Robert
Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. He is a wonderful actor. Hard. Obviously, but he's an amazing collaborator. He was he developed the project, with us, and was a key element and incredibly engaged and very smart and very well read. And I was just a joy to work with. And it's fun.
Well, I was just about to ask, what would surprise us to learn about what he's like on set?
I didn't know how funny he was.
Okay.
I expected him to be a consummate professional, which he was, but he was a great number one on the call sheet. He was lovely to people, and a generous actor. So it was great. Again, this was a dream team of a cast, for sure.
And I also want to mention one cast member whom I have to imagine you met when you made Now and Then, Miss Gabby Hoffman.
Oh, yes. Can you imagine?
One of my favorite people I've met in the last
She's the
15
best.
years. She's so lovely, but so talented. And I was wondering, how did she land in the show?
Well, she's one of Claire Danes' best friends.
Oh,
so
okay.
I re-met Gabby. I had directed her when she was 12.
I know. Had you seen her since then?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
I had seen her a couple of times with Claire.
Okay.
And so I re-met her. I love her work and thought, who could be better than Gabby as the tech billionaire? You
It
know,
was so nice to see a woman play that kind of role too.
I know. And again, you know, we're in unstable ground, you know, so there's a level of anxiety everywhere. It is a paranoid conspiracy thriller,
Right.
you know, in the kind of, I don't know, tradition. I mean, these are old films, so this is very current, but of like 7 Days in May and Parallax View
Sure.
and 3 Days of the Condor. And
Well, they tap into fear.
they tap into fear.
Right.
That's exactly right. But I think the one thing it might have in common with Homeland, hopefully, is looking at both sides an issue, and no one is right. There truth in both sides.
Right. It's very smart.
And I think part of it, character-wise, I mean, yes, it's a thriller and it's a great engine to hook everything on, but you have to have layered, complicated, complex characters. And that we definitely do in Zero Day. Yeah.
Agree. Good plug for your show.
Oh,
by the way.
good. Well, and also, I have to say, as far as truth, I think each individual character's relationship to truth is what this is about as well.
It's very Rashomon
Yes.
in that way.
Yeah.
And whatever serves that person's initiatives or goals. Right. What has been the biggest learning curve for you in making a series for a streaming service? It's a very, very different animal.
It is a different animal, and it would be a couple of things. I mean, one of the things is the limited I did right before I did Zero Day was Love and Death.
Yes, Love on
also
HBO.
a black comedy, very different, with an amazing cast. And I did 5 of the 7 hours. This was the first time I did all of it. I directed all of it.
Did that make it easier?
But some things make it easier, and it's really challenging because you're basically shooting 3 movies, you know, simultaneously because we cross-boarded everything. So keeping with a plot-driven character piece, you have to keep everyone on track, including myself. You know, that was challenging, but exciting too. I think that's a way that streaming has changed things, you know, in a really positive way. Because, you know, if a story needs to be 6 hours, it can be 6 hours. If it needs to be 12 hours, you can tell it in 12. It's an ongoing series, that's great too. So stories are being told in the time frame they should be.
In looking at your vast resume, which is something that can take days and days and days, I noticed a glaring omission in the sense that you never directed Sopranos.
I never did.
And then I look back to see who did direct Sopranos, and they only had one woman over the course of all their seasons. And I'm asking this to you because it directly feeds into my next conversation, which will be about the DGA.
Yes.
And you are the head of the DGA.
I am.
Which is amazing. Congratulations. This kind of lack of gender parity in a directing roster that we saw with Sopranos, and I'm not blaming anyone for this.
No.
It was a different time.
It was a
right?
different time.
Could that happen today with all the protections now that you're trying to build into these opportunities for people? And to what do you owe something like that with one woman over the course of 7 or so seasons?
You know, that's how it was.
Okay. So
Yeah.
David Chase is hiring people he likes, continuing
and
to
once
hire
he
the same
found the
people.
people he likes, he didn't want to try new things
I
or new
understand. Yeah,
people.
I get it.
And again, I think there was a lot of fear around. I can't tell you why, because
Right.
it makes no sense, because women and people of color are totally
Have
yeah.
proven themselves to be quite good.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, not an issue. But, you know, it was not the norm. You know, it was a white male business certainly when I started, you know, there were I think 7% in TV was directed by women. And I think it kind of clawed its way up to 13 or 14. But I would be counted many times, not one time. So there were many, many shows who never hired a woman.
Wow. And how has it changed? And
It has changed
in
a
what way?
lot.
Okay.
You know, and I have to say, I started mentoring, you know, very early on in my career, and that might have been because I came out of modern dance, which was very female, and I never really thought being female was a problem.
Right.
You know, but certainly when I moved into film, I realized, this is a different world. You know, and I decided, you know, I was told, you can't really help other women because there's only room at the table for one of us.
And that person didn't get help, so then you don't want to pay it forward for that reason.
And for me, when I heard that, I thought, that's not a world I want to live in. I think that's kind of heinous. So I just decided, you know what? If it affects me and people don't hire me, well, maybe that's the choice I have to make. So I always mentored other women, and it's never hurt me.
You are a great role model, Lesli.
Well, I don't know. Now what's happened, there was not a girls' club. You know, I was mentored very well, and I was mentored by men, amazing men who supported women. So I think I think there's room at the table for everyone. And what I care about is an equal playing field. You know, it should be equally hard for our daughters to direct as for our sons.
Right.
You know, and for our sons as for our daughters. It shouldn't be, you know, it's just hard to be a director. So, but it should be an equal playing field. And very sadly, the situation we're in now with production being down 40%.
Right, I was just going to ask you about
that. Was predicted. This is happening 12 years sooner. You know, it threw us into something that would have been a slow decline because things have been declining in terms of the amount of work since 2016.
Wow. So you did see this coming, but of course we couldn't avert it, it seems.
No.
Well, high hopes on that front. Yeah.
Let's hope, you know, it's really important to pass incentives that keep work in America.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not saying if you're shooting a show that's based, you know, about Paris, you're probably going to shoot in Paris and you should.
Right.
But if you're shooting a show about Los Angeles and you're flying to Australia to shoot it, can we keep that work in Los Angeles?
Yes.
And we can't lose Hollywood or the image of Hollywood, the icon of Hollywood as our storytelling capital. We can't lose that.
We can't become the Detroit of movies.
No, exactly. It's too important.
It is.
So
it's why we moved here. It's why we're here.
Exactly. Yeah. And we have to keep it. This is all of America. You know, we want all the production centers, New York, Atlanta, Chicago, that, you know, everywhere. But LA has really suffered because of not just the pandemic and the strikes, but the fires.
Right. Oh, it's been a tough few years, Lesli.
Whoa, I know.
But we're still here and we're still doing it.
We're still here and, you know, I start shooting again in a couple of weeks.
Well, that was going to be my next question.
Yep.
Tell me about what you have coming up and what can we look forward to seeing?
Oh, I don't know when it's going to come out, but that's a good question. I should know the answer to that.
Sometime in the future.
Yes. Okay. This is a psychological thriller called Imperfect Women.
Lovely.
Which I love that title.
Great title.
We do have imperfect men involved as well.
Okay.
No worries about that.
Sure.
And it stars the wonderful Elizabeth Moss and Kerry Washington and Kate Mara and Joel Kinnaman.
Wow.
And I don't know if the other actors have been...
I think they've been announced.
They've been announced. Yes. Okay.
What a great cast.
It's a great
And what can you tell us about the story?
It's about three friends, the friendship that changes your life forever, and you will never be the same again. And of course, there's a murder involved, and
as there always has to be now.
As there always has to be, but it's very much about very complicated relationships. And this is wonderful because things are not what they appear to be. And every time you think you know where a character's going or a plot is going, it doesn't go that way.
I think you like the murkiness of some of these characters.
I do.
You don't like a cut and dried good guy, bad guy.
I have to say, I haven't shot in LA in so many years.
I was just going to ask, like, not only a gift just logistically, but how does it feel to be shooting here?
Great, especially now. Because, you know, again, with production being down so badly, it's fantastic to be able to be shooting here. And I have to say, you know, actors saying we have to shoot here, this is what we all need to do.
Absolutely.
If you are in that position of power, we need to keep the work here.
Oh, absolutely. And if and when you have any extra time, which I know you don't, what do you like to watch? Is there something that brings you comfort? Do you have a guilty pleasure of where you just want to turn off your brain for 30 minutes?
Oh, I mean, I try to keep up with what is out there. I mean, the last thing I saw that blew my mind was Adolescence.
What did you think about the directing work in that show?
Oh, my God, amazing. And one particular episode that took place at the school.
Oh, that was amazing.
You know, because having everything be a single shot can sometimes work and sometimes not work, not work.
Yeah.
And it was jaw-dropping because I was never thinking, oh my God, you know, this is about the fact that they've never cut. It wasn't. It just worked for the story.
It did.
And it was seamless and amazing. And the performances are so good. I thought it was really a profound series.
I agree.
Yeah. But after I lost my house in the fires, the thing that somehow brought, that I was watching to like just break everything was Hacks. Hacks made me laugh.
It's the best, isn't it?
It was just, yeah. So it's, I try to watch all kinds of things. Like I mentioned last night, I was lucky enough to be at the AFI Lifetime Achievement Awards honoring Francis Ford Coppola. And it was so inspiring to see that whole incredible group of directors.
And they're still working. They're still
and
doing
they're
it.
still working. You know, Francis and Steven Spielberg and George Lucas and Martin Scorsese. And I mean, it's amazing. And the actors they worked with, and how they changed cinema. So what did I do after, I don't even know what time I got home. I watched The Godfather.
You did. Late last night when you got home?
Yes. I couldn't help myself.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
The movie, it's not happy per se, but it is always fun to watch.
It's just an incredible film. There are a couple of films I go back to. That's one, and All the President's Men.
Okay.
I've watched that many
Well,
times.
that movie is very you too, now that we know so much
Yes.
more about your interests.
Yes. Well, All the President's Men is so amazing because it's a true story. So
course.
you know what the end is.
Right.
But it's so anxiety producing. It's so on the cutting edge that you feel like the ending could be different.
It's kind of like Inglourious Bastards,
No.
where you're watching that thinking, oh, I hope they get Hitler in the
No,
end.
exactly. Well, the thing that Francis said last night at the end, after he had been given this award and people had spoken so beautifully about him and his work, he reminded everyone to be brave.
That is great advice, Francis.
Right?
That is something we can all do in small ways and big ways in
Absolutely.
our daily lives.
Be brave in whatever it is.
I love that.
And that was inspiring. So I think I certainly need to be inspired like that.
Absolutely.
And to inspire. And we all need to, remember that right now.
That is a perfect sentiment on which to close this interview. You've always been brave, and you're very inspiring too. Everyone listening to this, but also just anyone who knows your work, it's just covered in bravery, everything you've done.
Well, I still love doing it, and I hope I can continue for a very long time until they push me to the set with my, walker and my oxygen mask. I'm like, I'm in.
Well, I do have one final closing question.
Absolutely.
It's actually a two-parter.
Okay.
What do you hope listeners of this podcast have learned from your Hollywood story?
Oh.
And what have you learned about yourself in sharing it?
Oh, okay. I would say there's no one right path. Your path will be your path, but don't give up. It only takes one yes. And if there's story, tell stories that you're passionate about. That's really important, is that passion and the need to tell that story. And don't give up.
Don't give up. And what have you learned about yourself, even just sharing these stories? Are you able to reflect on how much you've accomplished and the impact that you've made?
See, I don't look at it that way at all.
Okay, you're just too practical.
Even at the age I am, I feel like I'm mid-career. I don't know what that says. I don't know what that says about me.
You're very
Can't be
healthy
good.
is what that says. You're going to live a very long time.
But I think just, staying, having all kinds of inputs. I guess that's what excites me, and friends of all different ages and all different experiences, and be open to the world, be open to life all the time. And I guess not getting stuck in one place, be growing all the time. And that's not, I don't know, I don't want to say that's easy to do, but life is all around us. So,
right. But we have to also open our eyes and take
to
notice
that,
of things.
yeah.
And I think it's easy to get lulled into exhaustion and stress.
And take an easy way. And sometimes that is the best way. But I think just being open to everything that is around you.
That is excellent advice.
But don't give up. Don't give up.
Love it.
Stay committed to your story and to knowing you want to be a storyteller in that way. And we need those voices.
We do, more than ever.
Yeah.
Thank you, Leslie, so much for being here today. I'm so honored to have heard your story, and I can't wait to see how it unfolds moving forward.
Oh, thank you so much, Stacey. This was really fun.
I'm so glad. Thank you.
Thank you.
My Hollywood Story is a production of Hippolyta Films and Entertainment. It is produced by me, Stacey Wilson Hunt, along with Sonia Slutsky and Wendy Green. Series producers also include Daryl Young and Janet Grayson. Our sound mixer is Luke Tierney, with camera by Ramiro Cantu. My Hollywood Story is edited by Nathaniel Wixon, with original music by Madi Gabriel and Jenny Carr of Moon and Star. Our logo design is by Brad Mitchell, and I'd like to give a special thanks to Champion Turf. My Hollywood Story is sponsored by Mattel Films and recorded at Neue House Hollywood. If you like what you hear, give us a follow, leave a review, and let us know what you think.